Hi, everybody. Welcome to CrimCon. We're here on day 3 of CrimCon and stream 2. We're going to give a couple of minutes here for attendees to enter in to the session. We are currently missing one of our panelists. If you are that missing panelist, oh, hey, there we go. Just saw them pop in. Let's promote to panelist. So we're still getting a few things up and running here. The way that our presentations work is that each presenter will have 10 minutes to give their talk. At about 9 minutes, I'll give them a warning that they're starting to run out of time. While they're talking, when you've got questions, hit the Q&A button down at the bottom and type in your question. We'll get to as many questions as we can at the end once all of our presenters have had a chance to present. We do have a late breaking program change. We're adding a presentation to this session. So just to let you know, we're making a quick change to the program. The program that's available on our website is live. I've got a couple of editorial things I got to go in and fix, actually. So with that, again, if you've got questions, hit the Q&A button down at the bottom. I think, Jessica, are you ready to present? Maybe okay. We had a little bit of an issue getting you joined up here.
Just let me know when I can start.
Yeah, so start screen sharing.
Okay.
That'll be the green button down in the center of the window. And it's coming up. Great.
Can you see it?
We can see it and we can hear you. Our first presentation is the fallacy of total institutions as social controllers in Brazil. Please go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Jéssica. I am currently a criminal sciences master's student at PUC-RS in Porto Alegre, and I am also the adjunct coordinator of the Contemporary Criminologies study group from Porto Alegre too. So today I'm going to talk about total institutions and the lack of social control. So in order to make all of the connections I have to for this research, I had to choose some key concepts that I could use to enlighten the subject that I'm talking about. So the first one would be the concept of imprisonment as a punishment itself. So this notion that we must put away people who have committed crimes or even been like captured by the system without any crime. And we have just to put them away for some time. I am actually using Garland's concept that he says that he understands the punishment as a cultural and historical artifact that may be centrally concerned with the control of crime, but is nevertheless shaped by an ensemble of social forces and has a significance and range of effects that reach well beyond the population of criminals. So this is an expansive movement of the punishment. So my second concept is that of total institutions by Goffman. That would be a place where people work and live, in which there are many people who have been put away from the society for some time. And this place has all of the characteristics of it's a simulated life. So we can do everything that you can do outside of the prison or other total institutions, you could do inside. So they live a rather formally administered life. And for this work, I'm focusing on prison as a total institutions. Then the social controllers would be those methods that society uses to make people walk in line. considering this, my key questions were: is the isolation of the imprisoned population effective? Their isolation from society altogether? Is it really needed? And should we consider reforming the system? I actually reduce all of these questions to this last one. Are total institutions capable of social control in Brazil? And my current answer for all of these questions is no. Why? Because of the situation of our current system. So we have mass incarceration. Our prison population is of 773,000, and we have a deficit of more than 300,000 places for people to stay. This picture is of the public jail of Porto Alegre, where I live. It has 1,824 spots for people and 3,476 inmates. So this is a situation that makes it impossible to actually do an effective imprisonment, if you know what I'm saying. We have the situation of drug use, cell phones and guns, or knives, even other ways of harm. And this is very connected to the fact that we have large criminal factions or groups that actually run these places. So we have the prison system that is, of course, corrupt, as in many places, and we have it. It is organized and dominated by these factions. So the rule for when you teach criminal law in Brazil or criminology is that you say to your students that if someone goes to jail and they don't have, they are not part of a faction or a group, they will eventually join one, because this means protection. This means the person has a place to sleep. This means they have access to food, to their families, all of that. So no would be my answer to all of those questions. And what I have learned from this research is that there is an immense exchange of information between the free society and the imprisoned one. And that has led me to believe that the sheer idea of the prison as a total institution, as something that is a part of the free world, is wrong. It's not possible to operate control through isolation, even less in these conditions. And the isolation itself is hardly operated and effective in Brazil. So these are my references, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Spanish validation of the Child Pornography Offender Risk Tool. I'll remind our attendees that when you've got questions for our panelists, hit the Q&A button down at the bottom, and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes.
We can hear you and we can see your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon and good evening here in Spain. My name is Soldino, and I am an assistant professor at the University of Valencia. And today I am presenting our work on the Spanish validation of the Child Pornography Offender Risk Tool, which is a project conducted in collaboration with Dr. Seigfried-Spellar from Purdue University. Currently, several standardized assessment tools are available for the classification of contact sexual offenders, such as Static 99R or the Risk Matrix 2000. However, we only have 2 risk assessment tools for sexual offenders with a Spanish adaptation. These are the SVR20 and the RSVP. Both are adapted by the research team led by Dr. Andrés Puello from Barcelona. Nevertheless, these tools are not validated for child pornography offenders, and they are full predictors of risk for online exclusive sexual offenders because they overestimate their risk of recidivism. In the last years, two tailored tools for child pornography offenders have been developed. On the one hand, we have the British CORRUTT, which was designed to assist in the prioritization of suspects according to their likelihood to have already committed contact sexual offenses against children. On the other hand, we have the Canadian CPORT, which is a risk assessment tool tailored to predict any sexual recidivism in adult males convicted of child pornography offenses. The CPORT was initially developed with a Canadian sample of 266 men convicted of child pornography offenses using a fixed 5-year follow-up. And this tool was further validated using a combined sample of 346 individuals investigated in Canada. Overall, its predictive accuracy is considered of a large effect size, both for any sexual recidivism and for child pornography recidivism specifically. So far, the CPORT has been translated into Dutch, Spanish, Danish, and Norwegian, and however, it has not yet been validated in geographically and culturally different samples. The CPORT includes 7 variables based on the correlates of recidivism in child pornography offenders, which are coded as present or absent. It includes measures on the age of the offender, his criminal history, sexual interest in children, and the content of the material seized by the police. And this will be the template of the Spanish version of the CPORT, which is available on demand. In those cases where information regarding the offender's sexual interest in children is missing, another tool can be used as a substitute for coding the CPORT item. This tool is called CASIC, and it includes 6 behavioral correlates of submission, of pedophilic or edophilic sexual interest, whether the offender has ever been married, if the child pornography material size includes videos or narratives, the length of the interest in child pornography, whether the individual voluntarily with children or if he engages in online sexual communication with children. And its predictive accuracy for sexual recidivism is considered of a large effect size. And this will be the template of the Spanish version of the CASIC, which is also available on demand. So what about our study? This is the first CPORT cross-cultural validation study conducted so far. We used a sample of 304 men arrested in Spain between 2009 and 2013 for child pornography offenses. And the data were extracted from the Spanish National Police using digital investigation files. In order to replicate the original CPORT development study, we also used a fixed 5-year follow-up, and we also analyzed the predictive accuracy for child pornography exclusive offenders. The main challenges of our study were first, the high amounts of misinformation. 98% of the cases were lacking information about at least one of the CPORT items. And second, the extremely low police recidivism rate. We found that 2.3% sexual recidivism rate in our sample, which may be divided into a 2% for new child pornography offenses and a 0.3% for new contact sexual offenses. And these rates were significantly lower than those reported by the original study, which was of 11.6%. With regard to the relative predictive accuracy or the discrimination of this tool in our study, we found that CPORT total score predicted child pornography recidivism with a small effect size. So we found areas under the curve of lower than 0.60. And with regard to CASIC total score, its predictive capacity was considered a medium effect size for child pornography recidivism among child pornography exclusive offenders with an area under the curve of 0.70. With regard to the absolute accuracy or the calibration of the tool, we used the expected and observed index, and we found that CPORT total scores of 0 underpredicted the actual number of child pornography recidivists, whereas CPORT total scores of 1 or 2 overpredicted this recidivism rate. Therefore, according to our findings, we can conclude that more evidence is required to confirm the ability of the CPORT to predict sexual recidivism outcomes in a Spanish sample. However, given the extremely low observed recidivism base rate, the fact that the CPORT could significantly predict child pornography recidivism specifically, even with a weak effect size, is still encouraging, especially when considering the amount of missing information in the cases reviewed. In any case, if you have any question or you are interested in our study, it was published in Sexual Abuse Journal, and you can of course also contact us. Here is my email and the ResearchGate profiles of my colleagues, where you can find this work and any other work that we have published. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A reminder for our attendees, you can hit the Q&A button down at the bottom and type in questions for our panelists. Next, we have regional cooperation in East Africa and wildlife criminal matters.
Thank you. Can you see and hear me?
We can see and hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Samantha de Vries. I'm a PhD student at the School of Criminology at Simon Fraser University. And today I'm presenting from the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples in British Columbia, Canada. I will be discussing regional cooperation in wildlife criminal matters in Eastern Africa. Eastern Africa has been identified as a hub for the illicit wildlife trade, which is increasingly recognized as a global transnational organized crime. International cooperation is necessary in these transnational cases, but notoriously difficult and rare. I was lucky enough, together with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Global Program for Combating Wildlife and Forest Crime, as well as Kenya's Office of Director of Public Prosecutions, to host the Strengthening of International Cooperation in Wildlife Criminal Matters in Eastern Africa workshop at the end of February earlier this year. The workshop aims were to enhance information exchange between investigators, prosecutors, and relevant intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, to strengthen mutual legal assistance, MLA, in the region, and to provide space for closed-door meetings on active wildlife cases. So I conducted a pre-workshop survey for investigators and prosecutors who were in attendance with direct experience in transnational wildlife cases. So we had 14 investigators and 20 prosecutors from 9 participating countries, including Burundi, Ethiopia, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. We did have a couple countries from Southern Africa, simply because there isn't a known illicit trafficking route that goes from Southern Africa to Eastern Africa. From these survey data, we had 5 themes emerge. The first theme was practical and economic challenges are plentiful. So on the survey, we asked investigators and prosecutors, do your agencies consult with another country before sending an MLA request? 35% of the 21 respondents indicated no or I don't know as to whether their agencies consult another country prior to sending an MLA request. This causes unnecessary delay in response time and impedes cooperation. Informal mechanisms, such as reaching out to someone's counterpart in another country, can ensure requests are adequate, realistic, and attainable. Mutual legal assistance is used most in the region for evidence, seizure of assets, and certified documentation for criminal cases. However, it does not appear to be frequently sent or received among countries in the region for wildlife matters. Theme 2, mutual legal assistance is not being utilized enough. So as you can see on this graph, we asked prosecutors, what do you see as the key barriers to mutual legal assistance? We have insufficient or incorrect information received, language barriers, time delay, requests not being clear, and no response received. 10 of the 14 prosecutors identified the top 2 common barriers to mutual legal assistance as no response being received or time delays. This tells us the majority of prosecutors at the workshop either do not receive cooperation or it is delayed. This may indicate that mutual legal assistance is not being used or prioritized for wildlife matters in the region, which leads us to theme 3. Regional legal harmonization and support are necessary. So overall, use of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, and the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, UNTOC, was lacking in the region. Now, this might be due to many reasons, such as lack of personal experience or awareness on part of the respondent, an issue of treaty ratification at the national level, or a lack of necessary national legislation on wildlife crime, particularly organized crime or financial crime. As we can see on these graphs, on the left, the use of UNTOC for cooperation of any crime type, according to 19 investigators and prosecutors, we had some respondents from Uganda, South Sudan, and Mozambique who have not used that treaty as their legal basis for cooperation. On the right-hand side, we have many more who haven't used UNCAC. Those from Uganda, South Sudan, Mozambique, Malawi, and Kenya did not have experience using that as a legal basis, which brings us to theme 4. Organized criminal networks are not being pursued in the region. So as a follow-up question, we asked investigators and prosecutors, have you ever pursued organized crime charges or investigated a criminal network in a wildlife case? And of the only 6 investigators who responded, 17% still said no. Of the 16 prosecutors who responded, 44% said no. Further to this, we asked, have you ever pursued money laundering charges or investigated money laundering acts in a wildlife case? Of the only 7 investigators who responded, 86% said no. And of the 16 prosecutors who responded, 75% said no. So small samples, but it does seem that at least from the participants we had at the workshop, majority are not using these treaties, or pursuing organized crime charges or financial charges, but they are pursuing organized crime more than the financial aspect. The number of survey respondents who left these answers blank may also indicate that a majority have not pursued such charges. So we only had 16 out of the 20 prosecutors in attendance who responded to these questions, and only 6 and 7 investigators out of the 14. Further to this, in the last decade, there's been 3 major investigations and prosecutions in the region into wildlife traffickers. Out of those 3, only 1 is currently serving time in the region. So we have accused ivory trafficker Faisal Mohammed, who won his appeal in Kenya in 2018. We have accused rhino horn trafficker Mauzu Kroma, a Ugandan citizen who was extradited to the USA to face charges on rhino horn trafficking and did not face charges in Uganda. And we have Queen of Ivory case Yang Feng Glan, who is serving 30 years in Tanzania. So of those 3, only Glan is serving time in the region. Theme 5, the repatriation of seized ivory and other exhibits. So a major issue raised at the workshop was that seizing countries, particularly in Asia, are not willing to repatriate exhibits such as large shipping containers of ivory tusks back to the exporting countries in Africa. Resolutions to this may be to consider samples, photos, or expert statements instead of using mutual legal assistance to request these large shipping containers back, which is extremely costly. The issue with this is some countries, particularly Kenya, need the physical exhibit in order to prosecute. So a resolution for countries in that situation is to have a judge travel to inspect the exhibit. So we also had respondents, 24 respondents from all countries and all occupations. So this is investigators, prosecutors, and some IGO and NGO representatives who were there from these countries as well, to indicate the knowledge they feel they perceive from the workshop before and after. And so we had 21 I statements, such as my understanding of the illegal wildlife trade, my ability to send a mutual legal assistance request, I am likely to cooperate with NGOs and IGOs or counterparts in another country, and so on. And they would rate themselves none, low, moderate, high, and highest. So this is pre-workshop, and as you can see in the red, there's quite a few who chose none and very few who chose highest. Compared to after the workshop, we had no respondents indicate none and quite a few indicate highest. So this was positive. We were hoping for this, and this tells us that participants at least perceive that they gained the relevant knowledge that was necessary from this workshop. The way forward, National Mutual Legal Assistance Guidebook for outside authorities in the region. So what we did is we drafted mutual legal assistance guides for each of the participating countries, those who did not already have one, with the idea that these people could bring this back to their respective countries, ideally get it edited and adopted by the necessary agencies, and then we could consolidate these guides into a regional book. So prosecutors and investigators could use this book as a practical tool to determine how and when they can request mutual legal assistance from their neighboring countries. This may be the first mutual legal assistance guidance for South Sudan, if adopted, who was recommending the document to their Minister of Justice. So for us, that was a really great outcome. I'd like to say a special thank you to the United Nations Wildlife Team in Kenya. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so much. A very, very interesting set of presentations. We have a fourth presentation on this panel due to a miscommunication from the prior panel. So next up, we have examining the relationship between prosecutor characteristics and court outcomes, a little bit of a topic shift. If you have questions for any of our panelists, hit the Q&A button down at the bottom and type in your questions. We'll get to as many of them as we can.
All right, thank you. Thank you to CrimCon for organizing this conference. It's such a great idea during this pandemic, and I'm excited to hear that it will likely continue. And thank you for including me into this panel as well. I really appreciate it. So my research question is, do prosecutor characteristics influence court outcomes in Florida? So for the sake of time, we'll skip the literature review and the theories that may be involved and jump right in to the study here. So the data that I used 64 out of the 67 Florida counties. This was my unit of analysis, was the county. This is more of a macro study. And I used longitudinal data from 2009 to 2018. So I used data from a 10-year period in Florida counties. And if we look at Florida, so each one of the 67 total Florida counties is separated into judicial districts. So 20 judicial districts here. And then each judicial district elects a state attorney that is in charge of the prosecutor activities for that judicial district and the counties that are located within those judicial districts. And so that elected state attorney is the prosecutor that I'm studying here in this study. So the state attorney, they're elected for 4-year terms. They are partisan elections. So we do have whether they identify as Republican or Democrat. And so I dug in and got some characteristics from these state attorneys. I found out which ones served between 2009 and 2018. I looked at their party identification, Republican or Democrat. I looked at the years of experience that they had. I looked at their whether they're male or female, and this is how I got the characteristics that I used. So first I just looked to see if they even changed very much. You know, was there a lot of turnover when it comes to reelecting the same state attorney, because there are unlimited terms. So you can see here are the 20 judicial districts here. So several of them, it didn't change during that 10-year period. It was the same one that continued to get reelected. Where you see blue, then that means that a new state attorney was reelected for this term, and then it continued. And then where you see purple, there were 3 different state attorneys for Judicial 9, for example, in the 10-year period. So we do have some turnover. So the specific prosecutor characteristics that I studied were gender. So we see that once I dug in, I saw that 27 of the 32 state attorneys that served over this 10-year period for the 20 judicial circuits, 27 of them, or 84%, were male, while 5 or 16% were female. When it comes to race, then we see very little diversity here. So 30 of them were white, or 94%, and 2 or 6% were another race. So not as much variability here as I would have thought I would find. And then state attorney experience, so it ranged from 1 to 42 years. The average was about 13 years. Political party, so 63% of these state attorneys that were included were Republican, while 12 or 37% were Democrat. I also did put in county contextual variables, so population, median income, percentage of Black residents, percentage of Hispanic residents, violent crime rate, and property crime rate were also included in what may help explain the dependent variables. So the dependent variables, again, these are macro numbers. So I looked at the percentage of cases not prosecuted per county per year for each one of these years. Percentage of charge reduction. So what percentage of the charges that came through had a reduction. And then out of the sentences that were given, what percentage of those sentencings included incarceration as part of the sentence. So we see a lot of variation when it comes to the dependent variables here. So this is by county. So if it was the counties that are in the light here, 19 to 32%, and then the darker counties go up to almost 70% of cases that are not prosecuted. So these are cases where someone was arrested and then they were handed over to the prosecutor's office, and then for whatever reason, the prosecutor did not move forward with those cases. So lots of variability here. Same thing with charge reduction. So out of the charges that came from arrest, you know, how many did the prosecutor say, well, let's reduce that charge, you know, for various reasons? And it goes from 0% in some counties to 36% in other counties. So again, a wide difference there. And then when we look at incarceration in felony sentencing, we also see a large incarceration. So this is just when it comes to felonies. So the lighter counties, 19 to 40, almost 40% use incarceration in sentencing. And then the darker counties, 70 to 85% use incarceration in their sentencing when it comes to felony convictions. So again, wide variation here. So what explains some of this variation? So I used multi-level modeling for my analysis. So 3 different levels here. So we have the judicial circuit level. So this is where my state attorney characteristics are. And then on the county level, and this is where county characteristics are, and also the percentages for the dependent variable. And then level 1 is the observations by year. And then the results. So I found that there were a lot of significant variables here to help explain that variability in court outcomes. So I found that attorney race, so in counties where the state attorney was white, there was less of a percentage of incarceration used, or incarceration was used less. Same thing with charge reductions. So charge reductions were used less when the state attorney was white. When it comes to gender, when the state attorney was male, then the incarceration was used less. And then this was not significant on the other two dependent variables. When it comes to attorney experience, the more experience an attorney had, the more incarceration was used. And then the opposite with cases not prosecuted. So the less experience an attorney has, or the more experience an attorney has, the less cases were not prosecuted. And then on political party, so one was coded Republican. So Republicans were actually more likely to not use incarceration, or incarceration was used less in those counties. And then cases were not prosecuted at a greater rate in counties where the state attorney was Republican. I also included election year in here. I thought maybe we might see, if there was an election year, there may be some significance because it's every 4 years. There was no significance for election year. I also looked at whether the elected state attorney was the same party as the elected public defender, which they do in Florida. They elect public defenders. And I found one significance is that incarceration was used less if they were the same party, not significant anywhere else. And then I also found some county level variables were significant, but not very many overall. So it was really, I found more that were significant on the state attorney or the prosecutor level. So implications of this study: prosecutors do matter. They vary in the way they use the same laws. And we don't have a lot of research on prosecutors. So more research needs to be done since these are critical actors in the criminal justice system. Lots of limitations here, just like every study. I have 3 counties missing from Florida. The 2 didn't collect data at all. And then one of the counties, I believe it was Seminole County, the data just looked kind of, it didn't make a lot of sense. So I just decided to take it out. It looked like there were errors there. We're only talking about Florida here, may not be generalizable. There was limited diversity in state attorneys. And then we have official data limitations that we all know about. And then I didn't get down to case level data with this study. That is in progress now to look at it more on a case level basis. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you.
Great, thank you for that work, and to all of our panelists. If you've got a question for our panelists, hit that Q&A button down at the bottom and type in your question. I do have a question for Jennifer on the last paper.
Sure.
So forgive me, but so you've got partisan elections there, yeah, right, for prosecutors. But what were the effects of party on your outcomes? I don't recall. I'm sorry.
Yes, so I found that Republicans tended to use incarceration less, and they did not prosecute charges at a greater level.
So that runs a little counter to expectation, or at least stereotypical expectation, doesn't it?
It does. So that was a surprise that I found in my study. And of course, when we see surprises like that, we kind of try to dig in. This is the first study that I know of that has looked at party and prosecutor. So there was kind of a movement in Florida, and there still is on the Republican side. It's called Right on Crime. And it is to use resources in smart ways, and possibly not use incarceration as much because of the resources that it takes. So the Republican Party being more conservative and generally wanting to tax less and less government, that there has been a concerted effort by some in the party to use resources like jails and prisons only for the most, violent criminals. So that could explain it, but more research is needed.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. Do any of our panelists have any parting thoughts for their work in connection to others, maybe? Yeah, yep.
I would like to ask to Jennifer. This is a very interesting research. We did something similar here in Brazil, but regarding the judges and the incarcerated population. So we have white judges and a black, mainly black incarcerated population. So did you find that, how can I build this question? Do you think it would be interesting to analyze both of the waves of the people who are voting for these people, these prosecutors, and the actual people who go through court processes, to see how their characteristics really affects the population, or is it very far away from your research?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fascinating to look at. You know, the problem with a lot of this is the lack of data, right? And so, but certainly any data that we can collect and analyze when it comes to court actions and prosecutor actions and people going through the system is certainly incredibly valuable. So yeah, that would be a great thing to do.
Thanks.
Any other questions or parting thoughts from our panel? Looking like we don't have any questions from the audience. I would like to thank our panelists again for sharing their work here at CrimCon. The quality of the work is amazing, and these are issues that, particularly in this panel, that I think a lot of us in criminology don't study and don't think about too much. So I'm really glad to have seen them. Again, I'd like to thank our panelists. We have one more session in this stream and across other streams throughout CrimCon. If by some chance you manage to get here without going to crimcon.org/program, you can go there and see what is coming up next. There's also a social event coming up later in the day. You can check Twitter at crimcon.org for that. For those of you who are staying in this stream for the next session, we are going to end this webinar and then restart it. So you'll all get kicked out and you'll have to rejoin for boring technical reasons. Thanks again to our panelists and to all of our attendees. Recordings from this session will be up on YouTube as soon as we can get them there. You can subscribe to our channel by searching for CrimCon at YouTube. Thanks again, and bye-bye.